the chart very closely, you might just be able to make out how World War II impacted passenger car production. And obviously, peak sales years were either at the very beginning of the decade and the very end of the decade. Chevrolet would lead GM to dominance in the U.S. market, with Chevrolet sales climbing back up over 1 million before the end of the decade. Ford saw a lot of turmoil during this decade, partially due to the unexpected death of Edsel Ford, partially due to the destruction of Ford manufacturing plants in Europe. But as Henry Ford II took over the company, focus was not only on competing with Chevrolet, but GM as a whole. And Ford would also climb back up over 1 million in annual sales before the end of the decade. By this point, the big three were well established as an entity, and Plymouth, although doing nowhere near as well as Ford or Chevrolet, had a firm grasp on the third place position throughout the decade, climbing over 545,000. Buick remained a top seller as GM's number 2 division, consistently outselling much cheaper brands, including GM's own Pontiac and Oldsmobile divisions, and sales reached nearly 375,000 at the beginning of the decade. That isn't to say Pontiac wasn't doing well. It was also a consistent top seller, climbing above 330,000 at the beginning of the decade. Ford's new mid-price division, Mercury, was essentially an instant success. Starting the decade as little more than a bigger, more powerful Ford, it developed its own identity before the end of the decade, when sales would climb above 300,000 annually. Oldsmobile continued to do well, offering the first fully automatic transmission, with sales climbing near 290,000 before the end of the decade. Dodge had become one of the more conservative brands in the U.S. market and focused its reputation on durability and dependability, helping it climb above 255,000 in annual sales before the end of the decade. Although no threat to Buick, Chrysler also sold well for the price segment, with sales climbing above 160,000 at the beginning of the decade. Studebaker remains the best-selling independent manufacturer by keeping its prices low, which unfortunately also meant that its profits were low, but sales neared 185,000. Nash remained relevant by offering unusual styling, something that it took to whole new levels at the end of the decade, allowing sales to climb above 135,000. But the decade ended with the economy in full recovery and the big three taking clear control over the U.S. market. What this might mean to independent manufacturers, we will see in our next video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and comment below. Thanks.